Hey, Sun here. I'm a privacy and security researcher, and you're watching the Privacy Guides. Today, I am doing kind of like a full-on review of Proton Mail and Proton Calendar. And it's quite coincidental that they have just released a full unified look overhaul that essentially looks amazing. And yes, I like things that look good. I really find that there isn't enough of this in the open source space. So thanks, Proton, for this. Now, before you go ahead and subscribe or whatever, purchase Proton Mail or use the free version, please watch this all the way till the end. I'm going to start with positive feedback for once, but I will definitely talk about all of the caveats later throughout the episode, and I'm going to be showing you how it looks and going way down the rabbit hole about why or why not one should use Proton Mail when we are privacy conscious. So yeah. First things first, this is it. This is the new Proton Mail. It just released today. This is how the calendar looks. Both look amazing and unified, and I could not be more pumped about this. I was kind of sad when I looked at the Android apps this morning and saw that they weren't updated. Same for iOS. I guess this will be coming shortly. I really can't wait for this experience to be unified across the whole spectrum from desktop to mobile. So yeah, Proton Mail looks amazing. And that is one of the key differentiators between this and other privacy conscious alternatives. It really does behave kind of like you would expect if you're coming from Gmail or from any other kind of mainstream email provider. And that's really one of the places where Proton is unique. It is privacy conscious-ish. Watch till the end for caveats. It's based out of Switzerland, which has amazing legislation when it comes to privacy. It has all of the bells and whistles, or many of which that we came to expect of an email client, but it isn't run by Apple or Google or another company that is into data harvesting. Proton also has free versions, which are pretty generous. I have upgraded recently. I am now using Proton. Again, watch till the end for the caveats. But it's been quite of a blast so far. So looking at the interface, you do have search, which is pretty amazing to search through emails. You also have conversations, and that is something that I am so happy of. There's two features that really did it for me. None of which are related to full privacy. More on this in a second, but conversation view is amazing. So if I click on a thread, I can then see the history of the thread. And that is really cool. That is something that you have when you're using Apple Mail, but it is not something that you get when you're using Tutanota, for example. And I am not here to bash Tutanota at all. There are many features of Tutanota that are very unique and extremely powerful for privacy, and I'll talk about this in a separate episode. But as you can see here, this is the same thread. It's two emails, and the thing that really got me excited about Proton Mail, and that was the feature that was not part of Apple Mail. And this is kind of like for nerds, but when you delete a thread in Apple Mail, all of the emails that were sent are not deleted. That means that if you're into keeping your mailbox tidy, more on why in a second, well, you have to delete those and then go into sent and delete the sent messages. As you can see, I sent two. They're all individuals. They're not inside of this conversation view. And that is really painful. So if I click here and I delete it, and I can use T on the keyboard, this is another thing that I absolutely love about Proton. It is super power user friendly, so I can just hit T. That will delete the whole thing. Now, why it hasn't disappeared here is interesting. Maybe it's a little quirk. Let me reload the page. Oh, why? Okay, well, that was a bug. We'll give them a little bit of leeway. They just released this whole overhaul. But once I did this, if I go into sent, there are no more messages. And I cannot show how excited I am about this. I really believe in leaving as little of a footprint as possible on other people's servers. And that is so important when it comes to privacy. The data that is the most private is the data that isn't laying on someone else's servers. So I usually delete as much as I can. If I don't need it anymore, I delete it. I'm not a big fan of archiving, although you can do that in Proton. So that just deleted the whole conversation. Let's compare this to what I'm used to when using other providers. So if I go here, I have to click on this and then delete. Now I have to click on this and then delete. And then if we go in Sent, I also have to delete those. And now thankfully Tutanota has features where you can click on capital and then select the two and delete both at once. But nonetheless, that's like a lot of steps. When I was here, I just had to do it once and it was done for, all of it. Now, if I click on new message, it has this little thing that pops up and I can start creating a message. So if I, select my Tutanota account, that is cool. Now I can go and say, test and write whatever I want. When you pay, you don't have to have this footer. And then come all of the encryption options. So Proton and Tutanota really advertise themselves as end-to-end encrypted. What they really mean by end-to-end encrypted is if you're talking with someone that is on the same platform. So from Proton to Proton or Tutanota to Tutanota, the messages are end-to-end encrypted. Proton Mail does it in a very PGP compliant way. They're actually the maintainer of openpgp.js. I may be messing this up, openpgp.js. Is that it? Or is it opengpg.js? Yeah, openpgp.js. So they're the maintainer of the official JavaScript implementation. So that is kind of cool. But that really means that Proton is or has to deal with all of the limitations of PGP. So no forward secrecy, kind of quirky UX, stuff like this. Tutanota has gone down a whole other path where they have implemented their own end-to-end encryption that is not that limited by all of the PGP legacy stuff. But nonetheless, as you can see here, I'm writing an email and one would think that it is end-to-end encrypted, especially given both providers really advertise themselves as end-to-end encrypted, but it is not. So if I click on encryption here, I have to essentially create a password. So I'm just going to put a really shitty password here and set that there. And now it is going to be end-to-end encrypted, but I need to share that password with this other person. In this case, it's me to me, but you get the point. And now there's this little lock, end-to-end encrypted. So if I go about sending this, we're going to see how that looks when we're here at Tutanota. So I'm guessing this might take a little second to come in. By the way, there is a feature in Proton, which reminds me of features like in Office 365 or stuff like this, where you can have it send a message with a slight delay. So if you want to undo sending the message, I believe by default you have like up to 10 seconds to do so. So that's super cool. Now, while we're waiting for this to come in, you get all of those convenience features that we've came to expect, such as starring a message, which is very useful. You can archive a message as well. So that's obviously by clicking here or pressing A on the keyboard. That is super cool. By the way, right now you're seeing this in the, what is this thing called? This is the Carbon theme, but you can also just switch to the regular theme. I've came to really appreciate dark mode. It's kind of much easier on the eyes. So I'm really happy that Proton has made this, integrated with all of the other apps that they have, such as Calendar. But I'll talk about Calendar in a second. Now, obviously, there are contacts by default. I think it will add everyone you talk to the contacts. This is really bad for privacy. I'll be talking about why in a second. But again, I'm starting with the positive stuff. So yeah, the other really cool thing with Proton that is quite unique is they have this, let me see if I have a link here. Actually, this is it. They have a little bridge that allows us to install something on Macs and I think on PCs perhaps as well, where we can then send emails using the Apple Mail app. So it will essentially intercept this IMAP stuff and it will then end-to-end encrypt it and send it out. So that's very useful if you're into using one of those clients. But as I've mentioned earlier, I really like how deleting a whole conversation will delete sent emails as well. I find this really kind of groundbreaking. I would have expected all email clients to work that way, but they don't. So that's something that I'm super happy with. And I'm kind of liking the idea of doing this in the browser. Now, I do trust Proton Mail won't crash and lose all my emails. So I don't really feel a need to have a local version, which means I get to kind of trust my operating system a little less from the file system perspective. So I am using this, and I am also using the apps on Android. I have switched to Graphene OS, more on this in a future episode, but the apps are kind of old. I'm guessing they're going to be revamped. I'm really excited about that as well. If it looks as great as it does here in the browser, I will be ridiculously pumped about this. Okay, so if we click on that email that we received earlier, you have received an encrypted email from blah, blah, blah. So this is kind of cool and not cool at the same time. It's very cool because it allows us, the user, to encrypt an email and send it to someone that isn't on Proton Mail. It's kind of not cool because, well, then you need to send the password through another secure channel. So that might be Signal, for instance. But that password could be exchanged in real life once, and then you get to like exchange emails, but then why not just do this on Signal in the first place? So I don't really get that feature, but it is quite helpful that it exists. I'll show you what it looks like. If you click unlock message here, then you enter the password. You would want something much longer than this if you want it to be really, well encrypted. And then if you click decrypt, then you get to see the message. And then you also get to set an expiry date, which is very useful. And the person gets to reply securely. So that is really nice. So there are a few settings that you guys should be aware of. So we're gonna have a look at this right here. So if we go into settings, I'll show you how I set things. Now, obviously you might want to do this a bit differently. So yeah, account and password, you wanna have a really good password. I did not enable 2FA on this because it's a test account, but you absolutely should enable 2FA. 2-password mode is one to log in, one for encryption. Maybe you're into this. I don't use that personally. Then if we go into security, you get to see apps that have connected, so you can revoke sessions. That's quite useful to see if someone is trying to access the account, or if you want to, you sold your phone and you want to just wipe that session remotely. So that's super helpful. So right now, authentication logs are enabled, but I can then disable this. That's actually what I would have wanted. I don't have my password at hand, so I won't do this, but essentially, you get to decide if there is an authentication log, which would allow us to know if someone is trying to breach the account or not, or you can disable it, which adds more privacy. So that is kind of cool, and then you get to wipe the data. So that's super useful. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of sessions here that I would need to tidy up. When I close Firefox, it wipes all cookies. I'm going to be publishing an updated Firefox episode shortly, so if you haven't smashed that subscribe button, it's a good time to do it. There's going to be a whole bunch more content coming your way. Okay, now they also have a bunch of really cool things to like import your old emails. I tend to like to start with a clean slate, but some people don't get the luxury of doing that and they need all the history. So that's cool that they've gone down that rabbit hole to make it as easy as possible for people to switch. Again, caveats at the end of the episode. Don't tune out and just go about using Proton. There's a whole bunch of things that you absolutely have to know about it first. So messages and composing. So yeah, keyboard shortcuts, that is super cool. You can enable notifications that are going to be done through the browser. That means that that browser needs to be opened. On Mac, you can click Command H to just hide that whole thing. It's very useful. Okay, now, I always disable auto-load embedded images. That means that it won't load any, attachment images that could be malicious or whatever. I also say, well, keep messages and send draft. This is disabled. Confirm link URLs. That's kind of cool. So it will ask you to confirm the URL before it just, pops open another tab and goes to a link. So that's very useful. And yeah, conversation grouping, that's the one that I'm super excited about. So then this is just, regular stuff. Email privacy, ask before loading remote content, block email tracking. So it's pretty cool. Like, when you open an email in a shitty email client, the person that sent it may have a little pixel and they'll know that you opened it. So they're mitigating this with those features. Then identity and address, that's where you get to have your address and your signature if you're paying and stuff like this. Now, I'll skip all of this stuff and I'll just go way down to encryption and keys. So this here is where Proton is actually doing the PGP stuff. That's where it's generating in the browser on your computer a set of encryption keys. I think by default it has one here for email and one for contacts. Contacts are not fully end-to-end encrypted. More on this in a second. It's one of the big drawbacks I find. But something that I dislike about all of these vendors is that they are handling keys. This is something that is pretty good for convenience. That said, I'm not sure if this is going to focus. Let me just make sure, looking at my cam here. This here, come on, focus. This is a YubiKey. So I actually store my PGP encryption keys on this in a way that is read-only and can be done in a really hardened way. So actually, there is a guide here, which I'll link in the description, about how to generate an air-gap PGP private keys using GNU-PG, Tails, and YubiKey. That guide is really, really cool. But then you can also just do this on your Mac. And there is a guide for this as well, which I'll link in the description, using Homebrew and GNU-PG. And I kind of prefer doing this. I prefer handling encryption at my end. It's extremely inconvenient, but is way more secure because I get to generate the keys and back them up properly. And this is something that I prefer not using in the context of Proton Mail. So what you're seeing here, essentially, I have disabled all of this PGP stuff because I do it by hand. That said, if you're a company, for instance, and all of your employees are using Proton Mail, it is ridiculously convenient that this is just happening by default. And if you're writing emails from, Proton to Proton, they will be end-to-end encrypted. So as an example of this, if I go here and I start a new message and I send an email to myself, now if I go about writing something, test, you'll see that this is now blue end-to-end encrypted. It's end-to-end encrypted because it will use the keys that are generated by Proton Mail, not my actual ones that you can get off the website. So on the website, they're always there in the footer. But again, if you guys are writing to me, on Proton Mail now, it should be end-to-end encrypted by default, but it won't be using my key. So this is kind of confusing. Sorry about that. But essentially, Proton to Proton is end-to-end encrypted. So this is cool for people who are less technical, for a whole family or a whole business using Proton Mail. Okay. Now, calendar really quickly. So, okay, contacts, you can do contacts. They're not end-to-end encrypted. Social graph is exposed. I'll explain why that is really bad in a second, but I don't use contacts because of this. Now, calendar. This is very refreshing. The calendar is extremely useful. It is kind of limited compared to more full-fledged apps such as Fantastical, but it really does the job. So the things that we would need, or at least most users would need, is good push notifications. Proton uses, iOS push notifications or Android push notifications. They don't have a custom implementation, which is not the best for privacy, but it works very well. So you do get push notifications for mail and calendar stuff, which is very useful. And you get to just create things. If you click here, this will be kind of what you expect if you're coming from iCal or from any other, calendar kind of app. And you also can do calendar invitations or respond to invitations. So again, this is extremely useful in the context of a business. So there's not that much to say. I mean, you can get up to 2 different time zones, which is very helpful if you're working off or with people in different time zones. You have a day view, which is, your day, then week or month. Month will kind of give you a glimpse of what you have in the whole month. And yeah, it's kind of limited. You can create calendars and then you create events. So, I mean, it's a calendar. It's not the most full featured one, but it just works good. And now it looks amazing with the integrated looks. Okay, now for the caveats. PGP is not great. PGP is just an old standard that a lot of people are trying to push aside. And Proton Mail is deeply integrated with PGP. That means that if you're using Proton Mail, it's unlikely that they will transition to anything else. Proton has really taken the approach of finding a compromise between privacy and security and convenience. They really put interoperability in front of hardcore privacy and security. And that's something that distinguishes Proton Mail from Tutanota, for instance. That said, we live in this world where we need to interact with other human beings that are not necessarily as privacy conscious as we are. And that is where really Proton is for the win. It's way better than using, iCloud or Gmail or whatever else. but we have to be aware of its caveats. So first things first, if you're sending an email from Proton Mail to Gmail, it is not end-to-end encrypted. The marketing is very misleading in this regard. You get to set a password like we did earlier, but it is not end-to-end encrypted. So I would say that's like the most major caveat. It's not because you're using Proton Mail with people that are not Proton Mail that you have any privacy, because all of the thread will be readable by the other person's email client. That is because Proton Mail wants interoperability. They want it to just work with email, and it does. So once you're aware of this, you get to be more, conscious of it and set passwords, or just, talk to people who are on Proton Mail, or handle PGP on your Mac the way I do. So again, links to those guides will be in the description. So that's the first caveat. Second caveat, when you look here at contacts, and I'm looking at this one here, the name and the email are not end-to-end encrypted. Now, the rationale for that, says Proton, is, well, first things first, those are not encrypted by PGP when you're writing an email and you're encrypting its body using PGP. There is no official, interoperable encryption scheme for, who you're sending from and to whom you are sending, and subject. That's why if you're receiving encrypted emails, usually the title will be obfuscated by just saying, hello, or something very random. But the contacts are not end-to-end encrypted. And that made me really sad, because Graphene OS does not have a way to sync contacts, and it's perfectly fine. So I was kind of hoping to upload my contacts to Proton and have it be end-to-end encrypted, and then have it be synced to my mobile phone, because, there's contacts. Now, this is very misleading. When you click here and you click on plus, you can create one here, and as you see, only the ones with the locks are end-to-end encrypted. So email and name are not. And when you're batch importing, again, the whole same thing applies. So using contacts is very delicate. It just leaks your whole social graph. And now one could argue that using email in general leaks your social graph because those things are not encrypted, but I just don't want to put my contacts, on their servers not encrypted. It just does not make sense. And that is something that Tutanota does very differently. So if you go in contacts on Tutanota, everything in Tutanota, aside from emails that are interoperable with non-Tutanota people, is end-to-end encrypted. So calendar and contacts are fully end-to-end encrypted. Again, using something that isn't PGP so that they get to deal with forward secrecy in the future. But I'll create a whole episode on Tutanota a bit later. So, other caveats, if any. Well, the apps are not updated right now, so they don't look as amazing on iOS and Android, but I'm guessing this will be fixed. Other caveats are that, Proton is this, growing company, and they are definitely choosing convenience over more privacy and security. So it's not a great. And another incarnation of this, if that's even an English word, is they use on Android Firebase, which is Google's cloud system. That means that for me to use Proton apps, I need to rely on Google for push notifications. There's no way to get push notifications without having a phone that interacts with the Google ecosystem. And that's something that I'm really sad of. That said, Graphene OS does a great job at compartmentalizing things. So you can kind of use it, but I would still like to avoid it. And that's somewhere Tutanota really excels. They do not rely on Firebase or whatever push notifications. They implemented their own notification system, which is really cool. And you also get to download the APK directly from their website for both, mail and calendar. And that's not the case for Proton. Proton, you can download the APK, I believe, for mail, but not for calendar. And it relies on Google servers for push notifications. So again, Proton is this kind of trade-off between convenience and privacy and security, as where Tutanota is more of the hardcore, cypherpunk approach to this. So both really have their merits, and I'll create a whole episode on Tutanota to kind of walk all of you through how it works and stuff. But I ended up choosing Proton. I do have a sensitivity to beauty. I find that those apps are just nicer. They're more fully featured. And it's something that I need. I mean, I'm working on this new business idea that I'll be sharing eventually, it's kind of a secret right now, but I'm super excited about it, and I'm going to have to interact with other people. I'm going to have eventually, I guess, a team and more people that can send emails to each other. And by the way, if you're a designer, this is a good segue here. This website could definitely use some design flair. So if you're a designer and you would like to work with me in the context of the privacy guides, please reach out. There's a contact page right here, so please reach out and we can talk. I really think that apps that are sexy and privacy conscious are the ones that are going to win the hearts of more users. So that is really what Proton Mail is doing. So I hope that was insightful. Let me know if you have questions in the comments. Let me know if you have more insights on caveats about Proton Mail. And I'll probably create a whole other episode once the mobile apps come out, because I'm really, really excited to see how they look. So yeah, see you soon. Bye.